Two of the most watched videos here are Gadgets 1 and Gadgets 2, and today we're continuing with the series Gadgets 3. And just so you know, the script for Gadgets 4 is already ready. Everything is about Formula One. We haven't even started talking about contraptions from other categories yet. If you want Indy, Can-Am, Group C, WEC, Rally, we can dive into that jungle too. Apparently you all love videos about crazy projects from Formula One history. So let's give the audience what the audience wants. Gadgets 3, that's what we're going to talk about today on Splash and Go. Let's go! The first project on our list today wasn't made for more performance, aerodynamic efficiency, or anything like that. It was made out of pure spite. Huh? That's right. In 1982, Formula One was at war. On one side, the teams from continental Europe backed by FISA, the International Federation of Motorsport, which today has all become the same thing, just the FIA. And on the other side, the British teams, together with Bernie Ecclestone, the FOCA, Formula One Constructors Association. The fight was about power, but also about money. And in the midst of this storm, both sides kept testing each other's patience. That's when Ferrari decided to mock the British constructors and their creative interpretations of the rules, like water tanks, to run underweight, and so on. And they put the 126C2 on the track with two rear wings wobble to show, don't you like to be clever with the regulations? I know how to do that too. After all, the rules didn't say how many rear wings a car could have, and it had two, both within the legal size. But it didn't work. I mean, it didn't work aerodynamically because in that race, Ferrari's cars performed just so-so in a year when they were actually the best on the track. But Ferrari clearly made their point to the whole world and did it in style. Owned by the Hong Kong real estate tycoon, I think his name is Teddy. Yep. Theodore Racing was a Formula One team that competed in the 1977 and 1978 seasons and then returned for 1981, 1982, and 1983. And the TWAS-01 was the model used by the team in the 1981 and 1982 seasons, driven by Eddie Cheever and Mark Schurer, with Derek Daly making a single appearance at the end of 1982. Just to clarify, I'm talking here about appearances with this particular car, okay? The team entered the model in 18 races with a 6th place as their best result, achieved at its debut in Long Beach, United States. But we can't just pretend everything is normal and not notice that a surreal front wing, designed by Tony Southgate, it already appeared here in 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙦 2 with the Arrows car inspired by the FW14 Tomcat, remember? The car undoubtedly had an unusual look. Incredibly, the contraption actually worked, and the only point scored by the team at the model's debut was with this front wing, generously described as exotic. Who am I to judge? The March 711 is a big hit when it comes to crazy car designs. In 1971, Formula One was taken by surprise by the team with its ironing board design. Let's put it that way, or surfboard, with a high front wing that quickly earned some mean nicknames around the paddock, like the ones I just mentioned. It never won a race, but it became legendary in the hands of the Flying Swede, the Super Swede, Ronnie Peterson, with his sideways driving style. That year, he finished second on 3 occasions, plus a third, a 4th, and a 5th place, which earned him the runner-up spot behind Jackie Stewart. Not bad. But the devil is in the details because Peterson's performances were actually achieved with a more conventional design, so to speak, of the 711. Since Frank Costin's original design ended up proving to be a big flop, the car was then redesigned, losing those, let's call them, playful lines. But it became immortalized among the ranks of the most magnificent and perhaps most memorable contraptions. The Toleman TG183 was the team's car for its third season in Formula One. Designed by a certain Rory Byrne, someone we would hear a lot about in the future with Benetton and Schumacher's Ferrari, and driven that year, 1983, by Bruno Giacomelli and Derek Warwick, the car struggled with reliability, breaking down several times. Even so, Warwick managed to secure 2 fourth places, a 5th, and a 6th, while Giacomelli also achieved a 6th place finish. So you see, 𝘾𝙤𝙥 wasn't actually that bad, but don't tell anyone, okay? But what makes this car, let's say, unforgettable, and also its successor, the 183B, as well as the 184, is a rather creative interpretation of the regulations, which specified the size of the rear wing, the one on top of the gearbox, and the rear axle. But there was a loophole that Rory Byrne noticed because he decided to make a wing that wasn't at the rear. It was practically in the middle of the car, almost right on top of the engine cover, generating downforce in a spot where no one else had thought to. And since the car performed well, the FIA didn't say anything, so he carried this over to the B version of the car, and then to the 184. So here are the photos. With the B version and with the 184, Senna would make his Formula One debut in 1984. As we know, scoring his first points, his first podiums, and the rest is history. And Senna appears again later in this list, this time at the wheel of another contraption that looks like it was made by artificial intelligence, but it wasn't. After a somewhat modestly encouraging season, let's put it that way, in which Jos Verstappen and Pedro de la Rosa scored 7 points, with 2 6th places for the Spaniard and a 4th and a 5th for Max's father. Everything indicated, or maybe everything is an exaggeration, but some things pointed to a promising future. For Arrows, a team that had performed very poorly in the 90s, under the technical direction of Mike Coughlin, whom we would later hear about in the Spygate scandal, and with a sponsor that would later dive headfirst into Formula One with its own team, a certain Red Bull, as well as its first driver in Formula One, the Brazilian Enrique Bernoldi. The team had high hopes for the 2001 season. But a second change of engine supplier for the second year in a row quickly made those dreams of progress fade away. That's because the engines chosen for the 2001 season in an effort to save some money were Asiatech, which were nothing more than Peugeot engines acquired from Prost's leftovers, refurbished. Calling them updated would be an exaggeration, and sent out onto the track. It didn't work out. The engine was less durable and less powerful than the Mechachrome, which in turn were the factory Renault engines that Williams used until 1999. Those were already outdated, but still better. And the result was a disappointing year with only 1 point scored by Verstappen in Austria. And in search of more performance and consequently more downforce in Monaco, they showed up with this thing that I couldn't even call an aerodynamic appendage. It was used only during free practice, didn't deliver any results, and was set aside even before any rival team could complain or the FIA decided to ban it. But it went down in history as yet another contraption that, at some point, actually made it onto the track, which makes me wonder about those that were designed but we never got to see. There must be all sorts of things. Curiously, on the same weekend when the arrows from the previous topic showed up with that contraption somewhere else in the paddock, Jordan debuted an invention. Let me tell you, Once again, a group of engineers thinking, let's think outside the box. Let's revolutionize this whole thing. No one thought of this here. That year, the Jordan car served as yet another step down the ladder. In Jordan's decline, after having reached their peak in 1999, then in 2000, they didn't do well, but it seemed like just a bump in the road, a detour. But then 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, it just kept going downhill. Gary Anderson had gone to work at Stewart, which by then had already become Jaguar, and the technical direction was in the hands of the controversial Mike Gascoigne. Then, arriving in Monaco, a place where everyone knows you need downforce, they showed up with an unusual solution, trying to exploit yet another area where the regulations didn't prohibit anything. You know where the front support of the halo is located nowadays. So they thought, why not put a strut there with a wing, generating more downforce? Not only generating more downforce, but also helping or trying to help organize the airflow to the rear wing back there. Rear wing back there. Well, you know what I mean, right? But anyway, you get what I mean. Obviously, it didn't work for the intended purpose. Look, it sounds like a tongue twister. And the car didn't go to the race using that thing. In 1951, let's remember, World War II had ended just 6 years earlier. We were living in awe of the jet engine. They had appeared at the very end of World War II on the German side with the Messerschmitt 262 and on the British side with the Gloucester Meteor. With the war over, humanity now had, for civilian use, an extraordinarily revolutionary and very powerful type of engine in its hands. And the sky was the limit, or, in the case of race cars, the asphalt. And Cooper started to think, what if we bring this thing to Formula One? But before taking it to Formula One, maybe it would be wise to test it in Formula 3, using a jet engine that operated on pulses. And the aviation folks can help me with this, but the English article specifically mentioned a pulse jet engine. It had a transmission similar to that of a go-kart, using a chain, and the thing ran a few races in 1951, achieving some results. 2 third places and a 5th place in a half-liter cup at Brands Hatch. Driven by 𝘾𝙤𝙢𝙢𝙢𝙢, even snagging a 3rd place in the final round of the championship. After what is considered one of the worst accidents in the history of motorsport happened, when a young, unknown driver with a short Formula One career named Bernie Ecclestone, also racing for Cooper, got involved in a crash with driver Andrew Lowndes. Lowndes ricocheted back onto the track, hit the barriers, went over the fence, and even struck a spectator who ended up with a broken leg. And do you know who would end up acquiring this car in the future? Another person connected to Ecclestone, Gordon Murray, who still keeps the car in his hangar to this day, before Lotus and Colin Chapman addressed, so to speak, the issue of where to place the radiators, which would later be moved to the sides, the so-called side pods, to reduce the car's frontal area, make it lower, and improve its aerodynamic penetration. This was already a recurring topic. Every engineer had to think about what to do. Various solutions were considered, but they all ran into the same problem: the difficulty of placing the radiators somewhere that would catch the airflow while also needing to keep the front end low. That's why the Lotus 72 was so revolutionary. And even after the Lotus 72 appeared, some teams kept resisting for more than a decade, trying to place the radiators elsewhere, like Brabham, which came out with the magnificent Model 33. This configuration was used in the United States in 1971 by the driver Tim Schenken, and it would still take Brabham several more years to finally agree that the proper place for the radiators was on the sides. Even in '84, there was still a radiator installed in the nose of the car, burning Nelson Piquet's foot. In 1988, Williams was still trying to get back on track, and it would take a while for that to happen. After having lost Honda and being left with John Judd engines, they lost all at once Nelson Piquet, the Honda engines, and their chief aerodynamicist, Frank Durney, who went with Piquet to Lotus. And then for the German Grand Prix, which at the time was held on the long straights of Hockenheim, and with an engine that had less power than the competition, since the Judds were cheap but not much else, they decided to try out a very low drag wing. And so it fell to Enrique Scalabroni to design the car for '88. So at the German Grand Prix held at Hockenheim with its long straights, and without an engine as powerful as the competition, because the Judds were cheap but had little horsepower, they decided to show up with this contraption, which was only used during free practice, and without it, Mansell and Patrese qualified 11th and 13th on the grid. And in the race, both of them retired. Lastly, and so you don't think that contraptions are exclusive to small or struggling teams, let me show you the MP4 to 5B, the high-wing version. In 1990, McLaren was going through a period of dominance. They had won the championships in 84, 85, 88, 89, 90, and would still win again in 91. It was the team to beat in the technical field, so much so that several of its key people were poached by rival teams. John Barnard ended up at Ferrari and later at Benetton. Steve Nicholas went to Ferrari after Barnard, and then seeing Tyrrell perform very well with 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙦 and the 019 model, which had a high nose wing designed by Harvey Postlethwaite, who, according to John Barnard, copied it from a concept of his when the two worked together at Ferrari. O'Neill Oatley, the man behind McLaren's 45B, thinks, let's try this thing here. McLaren then scheduled private tests at Monza. In those days, you could do that sort of thing, and showed up with this high nose wing with Ayrton Senna at the wheel trying it out. For some reason, the results were not satisfactory, let alone the aesthetics, which I don't even need to mention, and the design never went beyond that whole test. In fact, there are very few photos available. Did you enjoy the third edition of inventions? That's right, we already have material set aside for the fourth edition. Which one is your favorite from this new batch? Tell us down below in the comments section. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop any emoji you like. The algorithm loves that kind of thing. Leave a like, it's free, it costs nothing, and it really helps the channel. Do me this favor, do us this favor. Since I asked you to comment, also leave your hype. So you don't miss anything, we have notification channels down below, link in the description, where you can join and get a push notification as soon as I publish any content. Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp. And finally, our social networks, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok, where there's content all the time. All right? That's it. Thanks, and a big hug.